All right, so our last panel picks up where the Honorable Minister of ICT and Innovation left off. It is harnessing innovation at scale, AI, tech policy, and driving advancement in Africa. And it's really, the conversation will be around how do we use AI and technology to drive ourselves forward, and what are the policies, the infrastructure, the things that we need to make sure that we're getting the most out of it. And moderating the panel is Kate Manuka, and she's the Product Policy Manager at TikTok. Clap.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for staying for this afternoon session. We have a very distinguished panel with us today. We'll be discussing harnessing innovation for scale. We'll be talking AI, tech policy, and how we can advance digital transformation in Africa. I'd like to introduce my very amazing guests, and I will start with Esther Kunda, who's Director General for Innovation and ICT within the Ministry in the government of Rwanda. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Momar Dieng from ALU, the Harvard of Africa. He's the Dean of the Business School based in Kigali. And I'd like to welcome Ndegwa, who's joining us from Meta. She heads East Africa and the Horn of Africa region and leads economic policy. And of course, we cannot have this conversation without the money. So I'd like to welcome Jean Marie, who works with the Kigali Financial Center. And he's here to share with us some of the initiatives they are taking. And lastly, but not the least, we have an industry player with us who is very familiar. His name is Pierre from Sazience, who spoke earlier. Pierre will be sharing with us some of his experiences across Middle East and Africa. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very high-stakes panel leading from the conversation we had from our minister today. I'd like to open with asking each one of you to share about some of the opportunities you see that we have in harnessing innovation in Africa. And I'd like to open with you, Esther, to share with us a bit of the Rwandan story and your understanding of the Pan-African market.
Thank you very much, Kate, and I hope everyone has had fun while in Kigali. So, and I hope you continue to enjoy. So just talking about innovation, and more specifically also around AI. Rwanda as a small country, and I think Minister talked about it, one of the key things that we've positioned ourselves to be is a proof of concept hub. So how do we make sure that we build an environment where we can start to test emerging technology, emerging solutions that can be able to address critical challenges in our ecosystem, especially in agriculture, in health, in making sure that we have a healthy population, in climate, in financial services, etc. So one of the key things that we've really worked on is to make sure that Rwanda, in its regulatory environment, the business, the country in itself, offers an environment where we can enable innovators to actually come and test here in Rwanda. And of course, Jean-Marie will also talk about what else we're doing. On AI, I think one thing that we realized a couple of years back is that, and I think all of you know about this, is that AI is really a disruptive technology. In our different conversation here internally, we are starting to almost like equate it to in early 90s when people were talking about the internet, the kind of disruption it was bringing in every aspect of the world. So we've worked to build a policy that would really frame and put in place a working environment for us to harness its opportunities. And we think we can again go back to making sure that our population, whether we are creating a food secure nation, we are creating a healthy population, enabling businesses, we can get very interesting opportunities there.
Thank you. I'd like to move to you, Dr. Momar, to share a bit about your view on opportunities.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Kiru and the Africa Soft Power Forum for having us here. To make it short, I mean, this is the Africa Soft Power Forum. I think AI is our opportunity as the continent to be able to radiate both hard and soft power. We missed on the other three revolutions. We kind of almost got onto the fourth one. We are getting into it with cell phones, with fintech, with some of the innovations that the continent is leading on. AI is really our opportunity as a continent to be at the forefront. We already all know the numbers. We are going to be a quarter of the population by 2050. 60% of the continent is going to be living in cities by 2060. It's really important that we understand what AI and other technologies are going to help us achieve, both for our continent in order to improve standards of living and lives of people, but also for us to take our rightful place, I would argue, in the global scene. So the opportunities are immense. This is our opportunity to leapfrog, and it's going to happen a lot with education, with skills training, and this is where institutions like African Leadership University come into the story. It's going to happen with synergies between government, industry, academia, and some of the projects that partners like Meta are helping us accomplish at the University of at the African Leadership University, and it's going to happen in fora like this, where we exchange ideas and come up with new innovative ways to work together in order to solve some of these problems.
Over to you, Mercy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited at that question, particularly because we're talking about this in Africa and it's about Africa. I think that the opportunities in Africa, like Dr. Momar has highlighted, and also Esther, are huge. And I think the main ones to think about that get me excited every day is, one, we have a very youthful population. That's in itself a big untapped potential that I think could propel us way further than most of the other parts of the world, which is a really huge, I'd say, advantage you need to think about in everything we do. Whatever sector we're in, that is really huge. The fact that we also are primarily one out of four, like you said very well, a quarter of, 1 out of every 4 humans in the world by 2050 will be an African, already means that we will command a huge part of the population that would be, whether it's you're addressing this from a supply perspective or demand perspective, you're primarily going to be addressing an African a quarter of the time. And I think that in itself is a huge opportunity if you're thinking about that, whether it's from, again, supply or demand in whatever sector you can think of. I think that's really exciting. From a digital perspective, because, I love the digital space so much, and I see the potential from the perspective of we are still largely not connected to the level that we would like to be. So there is still an unaddressed market when you think about what more can be done in whichever sector, yet again, in terms of the number of people that are yet to even hold a device in their hands is huge in this market. So if you're thinking about expanding or growing your business into the future, again, Africa is where you look. And I think some of those are huge opportunities for us to think about as we move forward. So when I think about emerging technologies, we are only at the tip of the iceberg. And thankfully, we are all at the starting line with the rest of the world, which is a good thing.
You have some interesting views on availability of funding for opportunities, and would like to hear a bit about what you are involved in.
Okay, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Allow me first to explain what Kigali International Financial Center is about. So it's a government initiative. We are positioning Rwanda as an international financial hub. So what does it mean? As you may know, on the continent, yes, it's true, we see investment coming on the continent, but sometimes those investment actually, you see the company behind being domiciled outside of the continent, right? So, or you see, technology companies that want to raise fund, that we run out of the continent to raise fund. So what we are trying to achieve, to address or to achieve is to attract investors to be domiciled here in Rwanda, including fintechs. So our offering for fintechs mainly is that we have a quite comprehensive licensing process. So it's very easy to have a license. As you may know, Rwanda is quite efficient. We work with regulators to make sure that they get license in a very short time frame. And what we do as well is we are attracting and facilitating investors to be domiciled here. So starting by investors that are looking at early stage opportunities. We have some VC funds that are based here, and they're investing in companies domiciled here, but that have continental strategy. So the idea is to start here, you do your business, but you can also set up here, but actually your market is outside of Rwanda. So it's really two things. It's facilitating startups and fintechs to be domiciled here, and then also try to attract investment. So our role is to connect now to create dialogue between investors that are looking for opportunities, as well as on startups. We also have another pillar where we are working on, which is skills, but I think it will be a further discussion. Yes.
Pierre, would you like to add to a piece on the opportunities? Would you like to add to the piece on opportunities?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you all for having me again. So I had the opportunity to speak earlier. I think it's actually the reason why we are here today as Sazience is because we see this question as actually a solution from our perspective. I have to disagree a little bit with what was said, that we are a little bit lacking behind, we should not miss. Actually, we have been doing AI, Sazience, we have been doing AI for the last 6 years. We have started AI. We have, the first use case where I went to one of my customers was to do facial recognition. We implemented chatbots and so on, and all that is done and made by African people. Okay, so it's Africa is in the middle of AI. It's not something that we are actually missing. Yes, today we'll talk more about it because we hear a lot about ChatGPT, Gemini, Board, all these solutions today, but AI is here already. Okay, but one thing I want to add about the opportunities, because this is what we face as a player in the IT. The thing that I feel missing is that we don't go back far into the education. I think we are missing something on the education, and when I talk about education, I'm not only talking about university. When we give our kids a new tool, we teach them how to use a spoon, they learn how to do it early and they know how to eat properly alone. Today we need to do the same. From elementary, from primary education and so on, we need to give them this tool very early so that they will be able to innovate tomorrow. So that's one part of the question. The other opportunity I see is, and I think it was mentioned by sorry, I forgot your name, but yeah, is about the collaboration. Okay, we tend to work in silo, and I think the ministry said it earlier. We tend to work in silo. We don't go cross borders. We don't talk to each other, and that's a big limitation, and that's a big loss. Big players, IT companies, even global, they should be working together with the different countries inside the African continent to create together. We should not compete. We are not there yet. We should not compete. We should actually create value together. Okay, and later on we will compete. And we need to find fundings, and we need to invest. And this is why I'm saying, we as Sazience, this is our mission. This is why we are working in Africa, because these are the 3 dimensions that we are trying to implement over the next 5 years.
Picking up on the piece on education, Dr. Momar, do you see any gaps between academia and industry in exploring how we look at innovation and entrepreneurship in Africa?
So first, let me agree with my colleague from Sazience that in terms of the education process, it needs to start much earlier. So a lot of the things that we see right now are technologies that can be introduced as early as primary school, and our education systems are picking up right now, but there's still a lot of work to do to make sure that students are very early on introduced to the technologies and are the same way we say digital natives, they should be AI natives, right? Now, to your point about collaboration, we are also making a lot of strides in that. And I'm happy to be sitting next to Mercy, actually, because the collaboration between the African Leadership University and Meta has allowed us to train in the past couple of years 3,000 young people in AI tools using Meta's platform. We are working with the other players in the industry, making sure that our students in the AL group, because it's actually, the university is just a small part of it. We have ALX, which trains with a short term degree and certifications. We have the African Leadership Academy, which some of you know, which is the high school in Johannesburg. We have other parts of the AL education group, and each one of them is leveraging AI and these technologies to make sure that the workforce for the continent is ready, and some of the challenges that we see and that we are going to continue to see with the increase in population are tackled head on. We have in particular an initiative which we call the Center for Reimagine Africa, which is a public sector fellowship in which we invite the chief digital officers from different government agencies. I think Esther knows about it. So we invite chief digital officers from various agencies in government in Rwanda and outside in countries across Africa to come and think with us and collaborate with our students on how to implement e-government strategies and how to infuse all of these tools and all of these technologies in everything that we do, especially at the public sector level. So collaboration is there. We need more of it, but we have some really beautiful stories such as the one I just mentioned with Meta.
Great. Thank you so much. And Messi, perhaps you could add to this conversation in the context of AI and broader tech policy. As we know, digital transformation depends on much more than AI.
Absolutely. I think when I think about gaps, my experience working in the digital space within Africa for the last almost 20 years now has been, we need to have an enabling environment. And I think when I listen to the conversations that have been had in this room, that is a big challenge for everything, including technology. We need to have an environment that allows for an innovator, for example, to be able to come up with a brilliant idea, get the support they need in terms of skills to expand on the idea, skills or support in terms of partnerships they could get into, or even just being enabled to take that to market in terms of getting to commercialize the idea, for example, and make money out of it. And I don't know that we have enough of an enabling framework right now from a policy environment that can make that happen, but we definitely have made huge strides in terms of getting to a place where we can say now there is a recognition, for example, of innovation hubs, those kinds of things that allow for people to be able to do more within the space that they're in individually. But I think there is also, to the point you was making earlier, the point around collaboration is really important. I see, the example you've given, and we're not in competition for sure. I don't think big tech is in competition with others. There is definitely room within the digital space to get more partnerships and collaboration than to be competing, especially on emerging technologies. Like I said at the start, we are still, all of us, at the beginning of this. I know that some of the maybe tech companies have been at it maybe 10 years or more. We have definitely been using AI, for example, to rank for you recommendations of content you see on your feed, on Facebook, for example, or Instagram, or whatever. That is AI that we used to do that. To address safety concerns that you may have on content that you could be seeing. Some of that we use AI tools and machine learning tools to be able to pick out problematic content that we have already been able to train our data to identify, and that is AI. That's been ongoing for a period of time. But where we're at now, especially with generative AI, where we're using now AI to, let me say, create content, because I think when you're thinking about the creative industry and how do we move forward to allowing people to be employable through innovation in technology, it is more around enabling frameworks that allow for people to be able to create and do that more. It is around frameworks that allow for example, funding of ideas like that. It is around opening access to networks for different people. But even at the primary level, it is addressing challenges like connectivity. Is it possible, for example, for an innovator sitting in the heart of, I don't want to give an example in Rwanda, I'll give an example in Kenya, Turkana, for example, to say confidently that they could create something from their home, and that something could end up being a Facebook kind of platform. And I know that discussion was being held yesterday. What do we need to be doing to keep the governments we have accountable, to ourselves also be accountable in enabling an environment that gets the services that are required to be able to do anything around technology, to be affordable, to be accessible, to be inclusive. All of these things are really important to make space for. And I think those are still gaps that we have that we could do more to address.
Thank you. And obviously with the education, upskilling, and also the collaboration, which is very useful, and we've gotten some really good examples. Jean-Marie, are you able to share examples from Rwanda and regionally, because we have a lot of people from different regions around opportunities to access funding for some of these opportunities?
Thank you. So allow me first to answer to this question around skills, if you don't mind, or just to share some initiative that we are doing. So for Rwanda, as we acknowledge that we have a skills gap in certain areas, including, for example, if you want to set up a technology company here and you want to have, I don't know, 10 software engineers, we have them, like thanks to the institutions like LU and the Carnegie Mellon, but we still have a gap. So what we've done is, for example, to allow a company that is domiciled here to have foreign talent without a lot of bureaucracy to have the work permit. We are also working to attract actually diaspora, Rwandan diaspora, to come back to basically to serve those international investors that we are attracting. So just wanted to highlight this. On investment opportunities, as I said, we put in place a framework to host funds here in Rwanda, right? So we have a fund from business angels, like some business angels network that have basically moved from other jurisdiction to be domiciled here in Rwanda. We have the like of Africa Business Angel Network. You might have heard about them. They invest in startups across the continent. When you are here in Rwanda, our role is to connect them with those type of business angels. We also have some VC, like the like of Catapult. Honorable Minister just mentioned, I think, that we are going to host the Timbuktu Fund, which is a 1 billion fund promoted by UNDP. So, we also have some private equity funds that are domiciled here in Rwanda, the like of Admires that are investing in well-advanced tech company or fintechs. Again, they are not only investing in Rwanda, they're actually looking at the whole continent, but from Rwanda. So really, it's if you set up here, so we help you to test your product through the sandbox. I think Minister mentioned that. You can have a license, and we can also actually work together in terms of raising funds from those investors that are domiciled here in Rwanda. And we even now going a bit further, we want to create this, I think it's my colleague here who just mentioned that we need to create more partnership and collaboration. So what we've noticed that, for example, is that, if a company is domiciled or set up here in Rwanda, it's true, they have tested their solution, it's true they have a license, but again, we are 13 million, so it's a small market. So those investors, they want to see a product that can be scaled. So if they want to scale to Zambia, I'm looking at you because you're from Zambia, they will need to go through the same process, have a license. Then if they want to expand to, I don't know, to Morocco, Egypt, they have to do the same. So what we have initiated is bilateral negotiation between countries so that they can have what we call licensing passport. So if you are here, domiciled here, you have a, I don't know, PSP license, you want to go to Zambia, Mozambique, or other countries, then we would be allowed to operate in those markets. Very soon you will hear maybe one partnership, but it will be outside of the continent, unfortunately.
Esther, we'd like to hear a bit more about your perspective on what the promising applications of AI look like in Africa.
Thank you, Kate. I think what Mercy touched upon some of them that we've seen on the market today. But when we try to contextualize AI for Africa, let me call it like that, For example, some of the biggest opportunities is around public sector. I think there's a lot of process automation and enabling regulatory environment that you can actually harness. And one of the key things that we've looked at, for example, we recently, a year ago, 2 years ago, we did a quick study on what kind of solution we can do in Rwanda, and the public sector was among the sectors that came above the rest. The second opportunity is we've talked about the youthful population in Africa, but also the diversity of Africa. We have 54 countries. I don't know how many different tribes, how many languages that we do have. One of the biggest opportunities that we do have, and I think we should be able to all really rally around, is making sure that we're preserving our culture and as well as our languages. So one of the tests and pilots that we are currently developing is how to have public goods AI solution AI models for Kinyarwanda specifically. So translation models, speech to text, voice enabled, and everything else around that. So that, because when you're thinking about someone who's not people here in the room, the first thing you think about if they're African is that most probably they're not speaking English frequently, or it's not their first language. So how do you get some of these solutions actually into their hands? The second part, as Africans, we are an mostly oral culture. So we are requesting, if you're on ChatGPT, the first thing is you need to really understand how to prompt the system very, very well. But you need now to incorporate voice. We think voice is one of the key solutions that really would then bridge that gap between people who do not know how to read and write, people who only speak in their own language, but also even embracing our own oral culture. So I think for me, languages is one of those areas as a continent we really need to push and make sure that we're putting at the forefront on the different development we're doing. But then other than that, I think advancements in agriculture, in agriculture is very important, especially considering how climate change we are now feeling its effect today. How do we make sure that we are being more intelligent in how we position the continent to be more food secure, more food secure. On also, I think around enabling trade across the continent, whether it's around logistics, how do you build solutions that would really help you connect the continent everywhere?
Great. Pierre, I'd like you to share a bit on this, on some of the examples you've seen and what you see is in store for Africa.
Thank you, Kate. Just before I answer your question, because I was impatiently waiting to respond to what Jean-Marie was saying, we are not here yet in Kigali, obviously, but this is definitely on our plan, and I'm very interested to see how we also can collaborate in the future, because we want to bring our talents. We have thousands of talents, actually, that can help. Okay, but we suffered from that because we have a gap. Okay, just a small comment on the gap itself. What was being said, I agree with it totally, but there is one thing more which is missing, which is related to the fact that a lot of people go out of university, but they are unemployable. Okay, there's statistics which are really scary. If you look at Nigeria, for example, 80–90% of the people who go out of university cannot find work. Why is that? Because the curriculum is not aligned with what we need as an industry, okay? And this is something we suffered. I mean, when we started doing business in Egypt, in Africa, in North Africa, we wanted AI people, but there is nowhere to find. We wanted low-code people, low-code developers. There is nowhere. So we had to train. We had to go and bring and do the training. So this is just my small comment on this, but I want to go back to your question, and I think you have mentioned a lot of use cases that are really promising in AI. But just a small number, in 2026, the AI spending in Africa and Middle East will be around $6 billion. Okay, that's huge. It's a huge business.
That's a huge
So what other applications we can think of? Of course, agriculture and food security is very important. We have already some use cases implemented for, let's say, crop optimization, detection of sickness in the leaves, and so on. Some things are using, there's a project actually in Kigali using imagery from NASA and the European Space Agency to detect the insects. Okay, so there are real use cases which can help anticipate even weather patterns to know how we can optimize the crops and so on. So there is something here on the agriculture. There is, I will add one thing about the education. In the education sector, there is a big potential for AI as well. When we speak about the kids today, especially in rural areas, you have a lot of kids that are on the street. They cannot go to education, maybe because they are far from school, maybe because the social environment is harsh on them, and whatever reason, okay? But look back at what happened in Europe, let's say, in the COVID era. Suddenly we needed to learn from home, and we put in place tools very quickly, okay? I will talk also about medicine and healthcare, but let's focus about education. Yeah. So inclusion, and we talked about inclusion for 2 days now, inclusion between gender, between also different areas of Africa and so on. Well, AI can be a solution for that. It can be a solution because today AI provides tailor-made curriculum for each kid. We can build automatically with generative AI curriculum for each kid. There is very great examples. There is one example also for much further inclusion, which is, I think it's called BrailleNet. I'm not sure about the name, but it transforms text to Braille for people who cannot see, and they can be part of the same education system.
Thank you.
And just a week ago, before I came here, we were meeting one of our partners and potential partners in the Middle East. They have a solution called Key to Enable. I mean, when I saw this solution, I was impressed. What does it do, this solution? It just provides for people who have motricity difficulties the mean to participate in the same classroom with other kids. Okay? So this is all based on AI. And just to close my comment, because there is something important also on health, even healthcare, okay, with remote medicine, telemedicine, with predictive analysis of the lab result and so on. So it can have access also to rural and far people from access to professional in the healthcare to that solution. So I think AI is here and it's providing a lot of solution. And to say one thing is that AI is not a product, by the way. Okay, it's a tool. Yeah. So, and we should use that tool as much as possible, and we should innovate in all the use cases that can be imagined.
So we've gotten some really interesting use cases, and I think a lot of people will agree that the use cases map quite well with some of the areas in Africa we are concerned about, whether it's health, education, agriculture, food security, and much more. One thing that usually comes up in these conversations turns around some countries having data deficits. And I'd like Messi and Dr. Omar to just speak to this on how we can navigate that challenge around data and figure out how we support all stakeholders, policymakers, and businesses to move forward to its innovation.
Thank you. We're fighting about who goes first, but he's gracious. No, not fighting. We're all granting each other the opportunity. So I think following the conversations from yesterday and today, and I think there's a bit of concern around ownership, and there being almost like a fear that maybe the tech companies that are already building a lot of, or advancing a lot on the AI front could end up usurping or taking over, is one that should be, maybe I could say, let me assure you that that is not what is going to be happening. I think there is, one of the things I think I'd like to debunk and help maybe the audience understand is that the foundational models or languages that are used to provide AI tools or to allow for others to build on top of AI tend to be very, very expensive when it comes to the infrastructure that you need to put in place, the computing power you need to have to be able to run them, and so on and so forth. And those tend to be controlled by very few. Thankfully, in the case of Meta, for example, which is one of those companies that has that, it is that we open source our models and have them open to anyone that would like to use them to develop whatever they want to develop on top of that. So whether it be you have use cases or innovation around the creative space or around health, agriculture, whatever, education, all of that you have free access to, whether you're a researcher, if you're in academics, and that is how we have these amazing partnerships with different organizations, including the likes of ALU, to ensure that as many people as possible can actually tap into that potential to do more. So we are collaborators, we're not competitors or trying to take the space. But having said that, I think to the question of data, there exists a lot of data in Africa already. The question is it in usable state? Is it aggregated data in a way that could be made use of? And I see, for instance, opportunities for us within Africa, either through organizations like the AU, ECOWAS, or others, or even other formations we may have, where we could have a way to aggregate data more, to be able to use that to help tap the potential of it. And that needs to be done within those kinds of frameworks. I think it's a question of how do we get that data to be useful, but it's not that the data doesn't exist. I think the data is there. So I see Dr. Momar is keen to jump in, so handing over to him. Go ahead.
No. She's actually said really most of the things that I was going to say anyway. I think regulation is absolutely paramount. So having the right policies, and we are lucky to be in a country that really is an example for the rest of the continent and the rest of the world in Rwanda in terms of making sure that government is leading in terms of setting the rules of the game and making sure that actors, whether they are big tech or smaller SMEs that use people's private information, are doing it in a way that's ethical and that we can trust. And that's extremely important because trust is the first element. Once you have trust, then it's important to be able to create ecosystems of both generation and sharing of that data. What we've seen to be successful in other environments, including in North America, for instance, is open data policies, where cities, for instance, will just open their data lakes to entrepreneurs, to young developers, to aficionados, people who are maybe just learning how to use these technologies, so that they can think of problems that are really dear to them and start experimenting with using this data that's available publicly. It could be about crime, it could be about air pollution, it could be about cars that are passing through street lights and things like that. But once that trust has been set and the frameworks have been set to be able to anonymize the data and to make it available, then leaving it open for people to use their innovation and their genius is going to be the next trick, in my opinion. And then the third point is, of course, once you are able to make data available to everyone, to create also ways for the innovation or the platforms or the apps that are created to come back to the public and be developed into products. And this is where environments like schools of business and sandboxes and incubators come into play. This is what we do at ALU, is try to figure out the innovative, the talent that is existing already in African countries, in our young people, and tapping it and making sure to channel it to important developmental goals such as agriculture, finance, healthcare, and others.
Thank you. I like that you bring up the idea of sandboxes. We see this across Africa to solve quite a number of problems. There's been a very healthy discussion around remittances and payment, and quite frankly, businesses wanting to know they can access bigger markets, they can receive their payment. And a big issue around this is regulation. So I'd like to bring in Esther into the conversation just to try and unpack how do we balance regulation with innovation. I think the panel has done a good job sharing opportunities, how we can bridge the gap, how we can bring in academia, and also some of the great partnerships that are happening in the market. If you could share a bit about Rwanda's situation and your perspective on regulation supporting innovation.
Thank you. I think when you think about regulation and innovation, in an ideal world, this should not be conflicting concept. One of the key things that we've seen, for example, or what we've tried to do is how do you is the fact that as regulators, even as government, we will never have enough knowledge to be at the forefront or even be the best at understanding technology or the new solutions that are coming. So the best approach that we've started trying to do here is around regulation by doing, where we actually work hand in hand with innovators to really understand what is needed, enable them to pilot, enable them to implement, and then at the same time put the regulation as we're going. And we've been successful with a couple of use cases, and some of them could be everyone knows about Zipline, where we started by just one product of blood, and now we're having more than 6 products, including luxury products, where someone, even now today, I think you can order and they would bring you, not here in Kigali, but they would bring you a soda if you wanted to order it on a drone. So evolution is in a technology is where you have an innovator that is willing to work through those risks, and a regulator that is also looking at where do you start that makes sense, and you build the regulation as you're going, because you cannot say that that you're going to be, as a regulator, you're going to be at the forefront. When we passed the AI policy in Rwanda, it was 3 months after ChatGPT had come out, and then 2 months later, Gen AI became everything. So now, if you are regulated, do you go back to the drawing board? Do you now say that generative AI is not going to be used in the market? Like, what is your position? So I think regulation by doing is one key element that we need to be promoting and making sure that we're putting in place, and then growing from there. For example, in our transport sector, if you look at what we've tested with electric vehicles and electric motorcycles, we started as a simple regulation on the side, but now after a couple of years of understanding what is electric vehicle, how do they operate, etc., now they're part of an entire transport policy as a whole.
Yeah.
And the other part, maybe I wanted to finalize on sandboxes, is our fintech sector is the one that is a bit more advanced on sandboxes. And here the idea is having regulatory sandboxes. I think other companies or other institutions have more of technology sandboxes, but on a regulatory level is how do you then bring in just have this working group between regulators to be able to do that. So we've tried to set up sandboxes in risky sectors like the financial sector and the health sector. We're working through that, but I think it's that openness of really just knowing that you're not going, as a regulator, you're not going to be ahead. So work with that.
Messi, do you see this happening in other markets? Because we're quite cognizant that there's people from different regions. Do you see sandboxes, openness of regulators, and maybe even opportunities in the creative space? We had someone from Afrofuture Events, if I'm not mistaken, who was giving really good advice to people who want to either start their own businesses, organize events, that you should learn to either own your platform or have some, level of control. And sandboxes look like a good example. So we'd like to hear what you have seen as well.
Yeah, I'd say that I have seen those. I mean, even the collaboration, for example, you're speaking about that we have with them, there's a lot of testing that comes out of those spaces, just what could be possible with this. But I think if I could backtrack a bit, the question of do we have the talent or skill to be able to even know what to do within the sandbox is also a gap that we need to be addressing. And that is a really huge gap when it comes to the point you was making earlier, and also what Dr. Momar was speaking about, that we have to invest in those spaces first to create the environment that allows for those things to be effective. But yes, there are lots of sandboxes happening. There's sandboxes for small businesses, for example, in Kenya, where I know a lot of them also leverage technologies, including emerging technologies, to do this. We partner with, for example, Sandbox, I think they call themselves Sandbox East Africa. There is similar efforts in Nigeria and South Africa that I'm aware of, where sandbox environments are created, sometimes in collaboration with regulators as well, by the way, to get them to see what this technology is about before they can rush to regulate, to get to have an alignment on do we need regulation at this point? Does this make sense to do this way? And get that sort of like buy-in, public-private sector sort of like buy-in to agree on what is the way forward. But yes, these are happening, and I think they're a good model for ensuring that even the gaps are really understood in regards to what you have, what you don't have, and what then needs to be done to enable that environment to be apt for that purpose. Yeah.
Thank you. Before we get back to everybody to share their final remarks, we'd like to open up the conversation for questions. I will leave the democracy to the person with the mic to guide us.
Test my check. Okay. Hi everyone. So thank you for the insight. My name is Lionel, and I first time at the African Soft Power conference, and I have a question regarding regulation, and I would like to just know more about initiatives when it comes to privacy and, let's say, cybersecurity for AI, because what was mentioned at some point is the fact that right now there's a lot of regulation that talks about AI. I know the European Union, for instance, they're working on creating a sort of framework to bring some more regulation regarding privacy. And there are also some discussion in the United States regarding that. So now when it comes to Africa as a whole, what are some of the key, maybe, I guess, lessons that we could learn from other countries and areas regarding how fast generative AI is making progress, and our regulation maybe that can be voted today might be obsolete the next day because of the way AI keeps, I guess, evolving when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity. And I guess the question would be, does it mean that we need to create our own car, or actually just using other people's car that they already built and then use that here in the continent? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Would we like to take it, or should we take one more?
We can take one.
We can take one more question and then we'll address it.
Okay, my name is Jeremiah. I work with Irembo here in Rwanda, but my views here are very much my own. You spoke very well on language and Africa being a very oral tradition. I think looking at Meta's latest open source large language model, I think the white paper says that only about 5% of data was trained in non-English languages, and I guess you can conclude what percentage of that is in your own local language. What are we doing as like big tech or even like funders or investors to close this gap, to make sure that AI is accessible to people who don't speak these foreign languages? And then the second question is regarding regulation, as my friend asked earlier. China is emerging to be, probably the world leader or one of the world leaders in AI, and I think it's not a secret that one of the ways that they've accelerated so much is by having, let's just say, a not so good relationship with privacy. So, Africa being still in its early stages, don't you think that if we regulate AI the same way that the West, looking at EU, for instance, the way that they stringently regulate AI, we risk being in a place where we stagnate our own infant industry? Do you think that we should be borrowing their regulations? Because, I mean, let's face it, the West have been collecting our personal data illegally for many, many years, and now they preach regulation. So should we do the same, or should we also allow ourselves to collect as much data from our citizenry?
Thank you very much. So I think we have two big questions. One on regulation, whether we should start having our own regulations now or strategies, or whether we should just follow the Western model. And I summarize heavily here. And then the second one is around languages and AI, or more or less, I think I could say, AI in the African context, and the ability, I guess, of someone outside this room who might not be able to speak English to leverage AI. We could start with the first question on regulation, and I think I can see Esther, Messi, and Dr. Omar to speak to it. Yeah.
Let me try and make a couple of points on regulation. When we think about privacy, I think a lot of countries in Africa have already passed or are currently looking at personal privacy laws and personal privacy laws in terms of data protection and how that can be implemented. I know, for example, in Rwanda it has just gone into effect, and we're trying to understand, as a business or anyone else who collects the data, what does that look like in implementation and how and everything. And it's a really important question to ask and saying, what is the trade-off here? How do we make sure that we are protecting our citizens, but also not, as our colleague Jeremiah was saying, not also putting ourselves in a box. I think with data protection laws and how we've currently set them up, then there's still a lot of work to really do in perfecting them. But it's important to start from there and making sure that people have the right systems, and you can know if there's been abuse or there's not been abuse. I think for me that's the first thing that we should be looking at. And then in terms of languages, for us, for example, I talked about what we're doing in Kinyarwanda, and we're trying to make these models open source for everyone, that then later on everyone who's building any type of AI solution, AI tool, can actually integrate them for free, etc. And we are currently testing them, for example, with our community health workers to understand if this is a model that works and all that. I know other big tech companies that are also working with certain companies within Africa to actually, I don't know if I can call it digitize certain African languages. And there's been advances in most of the languages that are actually spoken by many people. Now what we need to do is start with the languages that are spoken by many people and go to as much languages as possible, so that at least in the next few years they're not we do not lose them. But let me see what colleagues.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll just add a couple of points. I think the gentleman was using the example of China and saying that if we, or asking whether if we regulate too soon or too early, it would stifle innovation. And I think Esther said it before, regulation does not have to be antagonistic to innovation. And in fact, if we go back in history, we can see a lot of examples in which Africa as a continent was able to leapfrog by being able to put in place the right frameworks from the beginning, and now is now exporting those frameworks to the rest of the world. One of them is the story that's been told many times in terms of fintech with M-Pesa and the rise of fintech in East Africa. Banks even outside of Africa now are looking at how they can settle instantly transactions and things like that, learning from what we have started and the regulations that we have put in place on the continent. So you can regulate, but regulate in a smart way, and it doesn't have to stifle innovation. The other example that I will give is in the green economy. Right now, a lot of people are trying to, pit, having sustainable policies and regulations, in terms of emissions and things like that, against our need to industrialize, and it's not a zero-sum game. We can actually leapfrog, and we can show the world how to do all of those things better and be leaders in new sustainable and green technologies, and at the same time be able to build back better, or in some cases just build new economies from scratch. And the last point I will make is in terms of the question that was asked with the African languages. I think it's one of the things that is really critical with AI and machine learning in particular is availability of data and of diversity of data. And I think this is where, again, the African continent shines in terms of, as he pointed out, just the sheer diversity of human and sociological traits that we have, and that we have in some cases much more of than other parts of the world, that can be real drivers of innovation for the AI revolution. So in AI, in machine learning, there's this thing that's called model collapse, right? Basically, garbage in, garbage out. If you keep training your model with the same data, eventually it will just not be good anymore, right? All of these large language models that we're talking about need this sort of life, this new blood constantly to be able to get better. And having the largest population, the youngest population, the most creative population in the world over the next decade, over the next century, will enable us to actually be leaders in terms of improving those models, just because we are able to create new data, we have innovation, we have creativity in our young people.
I think it's sort of like my closing remarks will be in response to the two gentlemen's questions. Fundamental to the development of AI work that we do at Meta are two key principles. The first one is openness, and openness is about what we were talking about earlier, allowing for people to be able to, open source models, what Esther was speaking about, for example, allowing for different folks, developers, innovators, creators, and others to be able to contribute towards what they would like to see that model look like. And that is where then you get all of this diversity that Dr. Momar is speaking about coming into play, where you come in and yours is to address maybe an issue around a creative industry issue, and you want to be able to have Kinyarwanda in there. You then introduce Kinyarwanda data or whatever languages that we have within Africa, or whatever diverse aspects you are specifically trying to address with your innovation. So open source models are useful for that purpose, especially because then you are able to ingest new information into training the data to start to understand you in the perspective that is local and nuanced to yourself. So openness for us is really fundamental. But the second one, and it's also just as important, is on responsible innovation. And responsible innovation touches on the aspects that were being raised around, for example, privacy. For us, privacy is by design, is in the design. From the beginning of the process, we are mindful and thinking about how can we make sure that this model is not going to compromise or violate the privacy of users or those who will be having their data processed in there. We are thinking about safety and security. How can this model help us to secure you while you're on there? So cybersecurity challenges and others are constantly things we are iterating around and wanting to understand and find solutions for using AI. And of course, technologies like AI help you to be able to do this at scale and well. And also safety, to make sure that you're safe within that environment. We're looking at diversity itself. Are we being very representative in terms of the data sets we're using? How much more should we be making an effort to incorporate more diverse data sets and so on? So all of these aspects within responsible AI are critical to how we work and how we are doing our AI advancements. So mine, I think, in terms of like really last remarks would be to invite all of you to lean into that space of AI in whatever sector you're in. If you're in the, for example, film and production sector, how are you using AI technologies to be able to improve or do better the film production that you're in? Are there certain aspects of film that you could be relying on the use of technology to do for you or to help you with? Or to even just be able to reach new audiences around enriching your content and enriching the work that you do? So I think mine is to suggest that as much as possible, the AI work is still in very early stages in that sense, that we still can all be very participant in that process, and the models are open and available for all to be able to lean into and shape them and influence them in the direction that you'd like them to do that for you to succeed. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In literally 1 minute, if there's anything to add from you, Jean-Marie and Sazience, as we close.
It will be less than 1 minute. For me, it's just to invite anyone in the audience that want to set up and is looking for a jurisdiction where to start. Rwanda is your home, whether it's in fintech, funds, or I don't know, holding companies, foundation for your philanthropy activities. Yeah, we are here to support you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and thank you again. But just to close a little bit and to wrap up the topics that we're talking about, at Sazience, actually, again, I want to come back to that point. What we do and to make a difference in Africa is we actually work locally. We try to understand the needs locally, and we try to propose solutions which are actually affordable and they can be tailor-made for the need of the continent, okay? And we use AI for that. We use generative AI for that. We use ChatGPT or chatbot in general for that solution. And not only we do that, also we have to be agile in our approach. Why? Because our customers, our stakeholders, all the collaborators that we work with, they need to get more into the maturity, and that takes time. So we should not provide rigid solution and just leave, because that will become obsolete within a week, within a month, and today we are not even capable to follow up what's happening in the market in AI. So we need to provide this agility in the solutions that we provide, so that while business is getting more mature, we can evolve, and we can learn together, and we can collaborate more. And two last thing, I also invite you to get in touch with us, because we are putting in place very soon an initiative to actually help startups to foster the innovation, to work together, learn from each other, and give them the push that they need to be able to actually put their products, which are responses to local problems.
Thank you very much.
One last thing, again, I insist on the academy part. We need to focus on training and academy, because the skill we have and the richness of the youth that we have in Africa is priceless. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to the Africa Soft Power team. The panelists will be in the audience if you have further questions. And the last score is really, please lean into AI. And there's a beautiful community here that is harnessing this conversation for innovation.